Europe has just issued the most explosive warning to the United States in decades. A warning that threatens to shake the foundations of the global financial system, destabilize the US dollar, and fracture the Western alliance that has existed since World War II. According to multiple intelligence leaks and diplomatic sources, European leaders are openly discussing the possibility of dumping more than $2.34 trillion in US government debt, a move that would crash the dollar and ignite an economic firestorm. Why? Because Donald Trump's new Ukraine peace plan, sidelining European leaders, and his apparent closeness with Moscow has triggered panic across the European capitals. This is the biggest transatlantic crisis of the decade. Today, we break down what's happening, why Europe is furious, and how this confrontation could reshape the future of global power. Welcome back to TFI Global. The current crisis began when President Donald Trump accelerated his push for a rapid peace plan between Russia and Ukraine. On paper, peace sounds great, but the details? That's where things explode. Trump's 28-point peace framework, all negotiated without meaningful European participation. And that's the key trigger. European leaders were blindsided. They weren't invited into the room. They weren't consulted on territorial concessions, not even informed about the military limits proposed for Ukraine. In a leaked call, French President Emmanuel Macron warned directly that the US was prepared to betray Ukraine on the issue of territory without clarity on security guarantees. Ukrainian President Zelensky echoed the fear, no decisions on Ukraine without Ukrainians and without Europeans. But Washington kept moving. According to a confidential assessment seen by the Wall Street Journal, European intelligence believes there may be parallel economic discussions between Trump's circle and Russian officials, negotiations happening behind closed doors, outside the peace framework. If true, Europe sees this as a historic betrayal. It would signal that Washington is willing to secure its own strategic advantages with Russia, even if that comes at Europe's expense. NATO depends on unity. Europe is geographically vulnerable. The US is an ocean away, and now the fear in Brussels, Berlin, Paris, and Warsaw is simple. Is Washington trading European security for a quick political win? This is where things get dramatic. European governments and the UK collectively hold around $722.7 billion in US debt from Britain, $1.62 trillion from European Union member states, a total of $2.34 trillion. This is one of the largest concentrations of US Treasury holdings on earth. And now, European policymakers are discussing liquidation, not symbolic, not limited, but a rapid sell-off that could crash US bond markets, send interest rates skyrocketing, collapse the value of the US dollar, and spark a liquidity crisis across American banks, trigger inflation and a recession worse than 2008. One European economist described it as a financial neutron bomb. Now let's be clear, it would also hurt European banks, it would rattle the global markets. But what matters is this, that for the first time ever, Europe is openly discussing breaking the financial spine of the United States if its security is compromised. That alone is unprecedented. This showdown isn't happening in a vacuum. Public opinion across Europe is collapsing in real time. A March 2025 poll across 9 European countries revealed that 51% say Trump is an enemy of Europe, 63% say his return makes the world less safe, and only 13% believe he respects the democracy. Europeans are increasingly convinced that the US is making them irrelevant in global politics. And in a multipolar world where China, India, and BRICS are rising, Europe fears being sidelined. Then came the bombshell from Reuters. The US may partially withdraw from NATO by 2027 unless Europe takes over most conventional defense responsibilities. This includes intelligence, missile systems, logistics, and surveillance, areas historically dominated by the United States. Pentagon officials reportedly told allies that European defense efforts since 2022 have been far too slow and insufficient to replace US capacity. This isn't just a policy debate. This is the potential unraveling of NATO itself. The alliance that protected Europe for 75 years is now at a risk. Meanwhile, the European Union just fined X, formerly Twitter, $140 million for violations of its Digital Services Act. The move was interpreted in Washington as targeted retaliation against American companies. US officials called it censorship. JD Vance claimed it was an attack on American innovation, and Elon Musk vowed countermeasures. But the message from Europe was transparent, that regulatory pressure on US corporations will intensify if Washington sidelines Europe on Ukraine and NATO. American companies may become collateral damage in a geopolitical war. So here's where we stand. Trump wants a rapid peace deal. Russia is gaining leverage. Europe feels betrayed, and NATO is at a crossroads. And now, the European Union is discussing the financial nuclear option against the United States. A sell-off of $2.34 trillion in US debt. A strike at the heart of America's global power. The transatlantic alliance, once the strongest in the world, is now facing its deepest crisis in generations. The next few months could determine the future of Ukraine, the strength of NATO, the fate of the US-European Union relationship, and the balance of global power for decades to come. This is no longer about East versus West. This is about the West versus itself, and the world is watching. Thank you.